Thank you, Mina. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, Minister. Thanks very much for joining this session. I welcome you also on behalf of the European Commission to this session, together with my colleague Osolia Frison from DG Agri, which already shows that bioeconomy in the Commission is also implemented on the basis of a whole-of-government approach, and it also features prominently. We just would like to set the scene by indicating what is important from our point of view. Can I please have the slides, or should I move them forward? Yes, okay. I would just like to set the scene. Yesterday we already had the opening of the GFFA, but I just would like to show this as our definition, our understanding of the bioeconomy, indicating that bioeconomy encompasses and works with the production, but also the producer, the use, the processing and distribution of biological resources as renewable resource, it includes a whole range of biological resources. The important takeaway message from this is that in our understanding, the primary sectors, fisheries, agriculture, forestry, are part of the bioeconomy. But if you add research and innovation into this equation, you enlarge the option space in utilizing biomass, and you create completely new opportunities. If you use research innovation in a responsible way, also for all three dimensions of sustainability. The second argument I would like to bring forward is that the bioeconomy also at European level matters. It's an important it has important socio-economic contributions in terms of contributions to the gross domestic product, to employment, but obviously it also matters very much for the quality of our life, for nature, conservation of biodiversity, and also to the contributions to climate mitigation, adaptation. It has a high innovation potential. We have listed here a number of examples where through research innovation the bioeconomy sets out the possibilities for new products. Only think of bio-based textiles, not only of cotton, but we have today textiles that are created out of wood, of celluloses, that have a lower overall environmental footprint. We have bio-based fertilizers, pesticides. They can help also in our European endeavor, not only to support food security, but also in view of strategic autonomy, get independent from mineral fertilizer imports. And the bioeconomy with these innovative products has a huge potential to support also income diversification. Let me just say very briefly that the EU has a long history in working on the bioeconomy. It was argued yesterday that the bioeconomy also comes from research and innovation. It comes from it was first taken up in a research and innovation framework program number 7 between 2004 and 2010, and then a first EU strategy was adopted in 2012, an update in 2018. Each update or each strategy needs also progress reports. We came forward with a progress report in 2022. 2023, the ministers for agriculture in the European Union came forward with council conclusions. So there is huge support also from the member states, and we are now going into the next phase with the new Commission, which is working on a new bioeconomy strategy at the end of this year. And let me also indicate that in the 2018 strategy, we have argued that the bioeconomy is really a cross-sectorial solution provider. It's a cross-sectorial initiative, holistic. We have, in 2018, included 5 strategic objectives, and you see that they are related to a wide range of different policy domains. I think this is really important that, from our point of view, the bioeconomy provides solutions for all dimensions of sustainability, the environment, economy, and society. Hence, today I'm really happy that we can also look more specifically also at the contributions of the bioeconomy in support of one of the objectives. We want to dig a little bit deeper, have a bit of a deep dive on what the contributions of the bioeconomy can also be to ensuring food and nutrition security. And with this, I invite my colleague Orsolya from DG Agri to take over very briefly. Please, Orsolya.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you very much all the people in the room for joining this discussion. Yes, thanks. In fact, I am from DG Agri, and in DG Agri, we also see bioeconomy as a key opportunity for the future, for food security, and also from farming's perspective. So we try to make bioeconomy that fits the purpose of the farming system. And I will say some words about that specific angle. So as the title well says in the session, future is here, whether we speak about climate change challenges that we are facing, but also we have opportunities, new technologies, new way of thinking that are there to respond to the increasing challenges that our farmers are facing. As you know, the policy perspective of the Common Agriculture Policy is ensuring food security and also having a farming society that can survive in Europe and that globally we can also contribute to this food security objective that we all have all together. And as Peter already said, our objective is always of 3 angles. The transition should be economically sustainable, should be environmentally sustainable, and should be socially sustainable. And I would say just some words about what are the meanings behind these objectives that we have. So the way we see bioeconomy, and we will have a panel session later on different way we can see the bioeconomy development in the future. The way we see it is we try to bring bioeconomy in a sense that it can bring additional income for farmers. So when you speak about, and when we will speak about bioeconomy solution, what we try to see is the role of the farmer in this bioeconomy value chain. To develop it in a way, also with our support, that the added value of this bioeconomy development can also benefit to farmers. It's not something that will strengthen them. In contrary, that can be something additional, an additional potential income for them. And for that, we need to innovate also in a certain manner. We also see, of course, that it can reduce their costs. If we speak about circular solution, it can be an option for them to reduce their costs and so be more resilient in this changing context we have. Of course, our other angle is we see our farmers their market for bioproducts that might develop all together. Peter already mentioned biopesticides, biofertilizers. So we need to create a market when farmers can get to those products that you develop. So they get to a level of marketability that it's really on the shelf and people can use it. Because for the moment we are not yet there. We are pushing farmers to using new products developed by the bioeconomy, but not all of them are ready to market for the moment. And the last one is about job creation. We have a real issue in the rural territories, but we have also an issue in the agricultural sector. The generation renewal is not taking place. So what we hope is that with the bioeconomy, we will create new jobs, new quality jobs, new type of jobs. But that is why we think that we should think altogether bioeconomy as farmers being part of this bioeconomy change. And I just mentioned 2 initiatives you already have, the emission soil, that is targeting on soil health. I hope you know this initiative we have. It is a Horizon initiative based on research and innovation, but is going much broader. And they also have bioeconomy solutions to also improve soil health. And I'm sure you know the circular, sorry, I have the European flag. And the GEO, the Circular Bio-Based Joint Undertaking. So we work with industries also trying to push in that direction. And just very shortly, a picture of what we already do. And to say how we can build a bioeconomy that is not competing with our farming system, but it can complement our farming system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rosalia and Peter. And now we will move on, setting the scene further with the spotlight session from the Danish Ministry for Green Transition. What it is and what are the steps taken in the Danish policy. This is what we will hear from Minister Bruce. Please welcome.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. What I'm about to say is very much in line with what we've just heard from the Commission. And I'll try to give you an example on how we in Denmark work to transform our economy to a bioeconomy. Why is this important? It's important because we are a small country in Denmark. We have scarce resources. 60% of the Danish land is used for farming. And if we are not able to transform our traditional ways of farming into a new bioeconomy, we will not be able to solve several problems, both climate change, nature and diversity, but also to enhance jobs, growth in this sector. And that's what I'm going to tell you a little bit about. And then, as you might know, Denmark will lead the European presidency in the fall of this year, and are looking very much forward, together with the Commission, to set even more focus on bioeconomy growth. So I'll try to use this. Yeah. I think it's the wrong way. Sorry, there's something with the slides here. Anyway. Okay. Anyway, what I was going to say is that, just to set the context, in Denmark we have, as you might know, a climate goal of reducing by 70% by 2030. This means that sector for sector we have to lower emissions. Today, the agricultural sector is due to 1/3 of all emissions in Denmark. By 2030, it will be half of all emissions. And so when we're reducing emissions from the industry, from the transportation sector, we also need to figure out a way how to reduce emissions from our agricultural sector. Otherwise, we won't reach our goal for 70% reduction by 2030, and our even further goal to be carbon neutral by 2045. And that's why we figured out a way to say, okay, how do we do a deal, a new green deal that solves some of the issues we have about climate solutions, getting more and better water quality, and also ensuring better conditions for nature and biodiversity, since we also have obviously a lot of focus on the climate change crisis, but also recognizing that the crisis we are in globally, but also in Denmark, about biodiversity. And so that's why we, together with the farming industry, nature organizations, local municipalities, the state, made a deal in the spring of 24 last year, sat together, figured out a way how to reduce emissions and at the same time ensure water quality and giving more space to nature and biodiversity. And in the fall, we then constructed this new Ministry of Green Transition that I'm now leading, and was also leading the political negotiations in the Danish Parliament, and we made a deal in November carrying out this. And I'm trying to tell you a little bit about the deal, also why it's important into a bioeconomic way of thinking, because it's actually driving incentives to create the change that we need. And so, first of all, it's a deal about climate taxing. We have done carbon pricing taxes on the Danish industries, on heavy trucks, vehicles, aviation tax, and now it's time also to be the first country in the world to actually introduce a CO2 tax on emissions from the agricultural sector, from livestock. And so we'll do that. It will be in place by 2030 and fully implemented by 2035. And we know from experience, because we did a deal on an extra top-on tax on top of the European quota system on Danish industries back in 2022 when I was Minister of Taxation doing that deal, that the 44 biggest polluting industries in Denmark have reduced their emissions by nearly 20% over only 2 years, because they know that now, by the 1st of January this year, they have to pay a tax on the emissions from the industries. So it's the same effect that we figure out and hope for and rely on will happen in the same way, and also drive investments into a new bioeconomy from the agricultural sector. Another important element is obviously to make sure we have better water quality. Denmark being a small country with a lot of water around, and poor quality, lack of oxygen, and so we have to reduce the nitrogen polluting of our fjords and seas. And at the same time, there's something, sorry. Yeah, anyway. There we go. And the third element is about how to ensure more nature and biodiversity. We're going to plant 1 billion trees over the next 20 years, and taking our peatlands. And that means that the 60% of the land now that's farmed, we have to reduce that percentage. So nearly 10% of the Danish landscape will be changed over the next 20 years. 15% of our current farming land will have to be reduced. It also means then that it will drive an incentive to produce in a more bioeconomic way, and also using biotech to create new ways of producing in the farming sector, to create jobs, to involve the sector, to strengthen the sector. And that's why a very important deal here with the farming sector is also actually to focusing on job creation and growth. And how do we do it? We invest. We invest in new technology. We invest in research. We are combining the strength we have in Denmark in the pharmaceutical sector. Novo, of course, everyone knows Novo, a big Danish company, have created a lot of other companies, and combining that with the skills in the agricultural sector, new farmers, creates new products using old technology, grass. You've done that for all times. Thinking it in new ways. How can we biorefine grass? How can we use it for protein? How can we use it for textile, for our clothing, etc. Thinking in new ways, driving a new bioeconomy. That's the whole purpose. And so we see bioeconomy as a growth instrument, strengthening the competitiveness of this sector, and at the same time solving very important issues about climate change, nature, and water quality. A little bit more concrete about the bioeconomy. We see Cascade using very, very important that the scarce resources, that we maximize the effect that we get out of our way of producing. So it's a key element to both work at the European level, obviously, but also seeing this as a strategic growth plan for our agricultural sector. Obviously, we also invest heavily in it. Like, in Denmark, we invested heavily in windmills. We are investing heavily in CCS, carbon capture and storage. And now we're investing in producing biogas, producing pyrolysis, biochar in the end, seeing how can we use farmers as also energy producing, energy producers, and at the same time producing a lot of new products, and creating also obviously a demand for these products is important. And so we are very confident that if we are able to once again show that we can lead by example, we can also create a situation where farmers will actually be able to compete at the world market. And sometimes, obviously, we still meet farmers as we met people from the Danish industries back in 22 saying, why do we have to be taxed more than our competitors in Germany or in Poland or other places? And wouldn't it just create a situation where we move out production and then they can farm or produce other places? What we have learned is that if we're doing it together, we'll actually be able to both reach our climate goals, but also actually create more competitive businesses in Denmark. And that's the whole idea. And also do it in a way where we don't have demonstrations and the common Dane still will be able to, afford to pay for the food in the store and the products. And so we see it as an investment. And as I mentioned also before, this is a huge deal because it's also reshaping the Danish landscape. And it's, in that sense, in a historic sense, a huge one-time investment in taking out farmland and using it for something else, but also then demanding a lot from the farmers because they should also see then how can we do forest farming, how can we create new ways of farming that are more sensible to our environment, solving the climate change, and at the same time expanding businesses. And that's our take in on the bioeconomy. And then just a short, I don't know how much time I've left. 2 minutes? 1 minute? We fund this, obviously. We are creating a huge green fund in the moment in my ministry. We are doing it together with partners, trying to attract funding from businesses. We have created 23 local tripartite groups all over Denmark, where farmers and nature organizations at the governmental level sit together to carry out these plans. And we have created a whole new ministry that I'm now leading, which is a new thing in Denmark as well, that we have a problem-driven ministry. We have this one great deal, and then we have one ministry to carry out the deal to make sure that we can actually implement and be a little more faster in breaking down bureaucracy. And that's my job. It's a pretty cool job, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Bruce. What an inspiration. So problem solving together with policy tools to drive new bioeconomy. And dear audience, we now have a chance to address Minister Bruce and ask questions. I invite you, if you can approach the microphone on the center, but if not, I'll pass on my microphone. Please present who you are and what's your affiliation.
Hello, Valentine Friedel from Euroactive. Thanks, it was very inspiring. The leakage problem you were addressing. So there is no shift of production out of the country, and would you be in favor to introduce a national label that your consumers can make an informed choice, or how do you combat the leakage problem? In Germany, it's always the big issue if you want to introduce any environmental laws.
Well, it was a great concern, both when we introduced the tax on the Danish industries and now also a part of the debate here. And you might wonder, how the heck did we get the farmers to get into this deal? At the same time as farmers were, demonstrating in Brussels. Well, because the context is important. We have our climate goals, and if you are the Danish industries or you are the transportation sector and you're reducing your emissions, if we were not successful about reducing emissions from the agricultural sector, other sectors would have to do more. And so that's why the context here is important to understand. The leakage problem obviously has also been a very important thing. But the catch, what's in it for the farmers, is that we invest. We invest in developing new technology, we invest in bioeconomy. So it's also a deal where we say, you know, we demand a lot from the farmers, but we're also willing to invest a lot to creating and developing new ways of producing more sustainable and therefore also believing that we could be more competitiveness. And, you know, climate change is also reducing not only or pressuring the productions in Denmark, but we also have globally to figure out how do we produce foods and stuff in a world where we will be 10 billion people and where climate change is reducing not only pressuring the resources we have in Denmark, but all over Europe and the planet.
And we have a question here, and straight after one from the aisle mic. So we'll take those one after the other. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Roman Chris. I'm from Benemy Technologies, the Czech company which produces the cultivated meat, or the whole technology. I would like to ask you whether, for instance, your ministry could be an ambassador for improving the regulatory framework and increasing the competencies of the European bureaucrats and politicians, because there is a lack of knowledge generally about the cultivated meat, and whether there would be possibility to how to say that to overcome the regulatory issues also on the lower level in European Union. Like right now we are facing some problem in Germany.
Would you like to take that now or
no,
straight?
It's up to you.
Okay. In the interest of time, maybe we take the second question and you can then combine your response to both of these. Please.
Okay, my name is Emma Jordan. I'm from the Alliance for Diversity International and they're in the Food Environment and Consumer Behavior Unit. And that's where my question goes to. I haven't heard the word consumer as such, as all this transition will lead or require a cultural behavior change in consumption and dietary consumption. Assuming that the way you intensify the remaining land under agriculture management in a way that it actually remains healthy, but also will change in the availability and the price structure of the food offered in Denmark, which is already at a high price. So I'm wondering how the consumer comes into your concept. How do you want to make sure that everything what is produced remains healthy or becomes even healthier, because some of the products are not healthy?
Yeah, and I'll keep my answer short, and then hopefully time for more questions. Well, first of all, I thought it was a very good introduction here from the Commission. And actually, my view is that the European Commission at the European level is pretty progressive in many ways. Of course, we would like to lead by example. And I'm more than happy to also participate in this, and we have the European presidency in the fall. But my experience is that there's a lot of appetite on doing this smarter, and we are also fighting bureaucracy by ourselves in Denmark. So also there we have the same challenges. The consumers is important because if we are not able to both bring in the farmers but also have a very close eye on the consumer and the pricing for the ordinary Dane, we will not be able to create sector by sector the change that we need to produce more sustainable and climate neutral. And that's also why we are very focused on that. And that's, you know, how does that, you know, combines with doing extra taxes that in the end, you know, will higher the price on products? Because we do it in a way where we also invest. And we have a strong belief and experience that when we do that, you could actually produce more efficient, and they also keep the prices low. And that's the whole idea. And if you look at the price on meat or milk by 2030, as a result of the tax we introduce, it's very little, the extra pricing. And if you look at what is, you know, have cost over the last couple of years, other factors will have an even higher impact on the prices than the taxes we introduce. Interest rates, the war in Ukraine, etc., etc. And you know, none of us can foresee exactly how the situation is by 2030.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Minister Bruce, and thank you, the audience, for the great questions. And now that the scene is set properly, we are ready to move on the main dish, our expert panel. And we will start with the keynote speaker, Professor Michael Obersteiner. He comes from the University of Oxford, UK, and his presentation title, which will appear on the screen, is Food and Nutrition Security Transformation with New Biotechnologies. So please, Professor Obersteiner, and after your presentation, I invite you to take a seat and we will follow with the second presentations.
Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm very glad to just continue the narrative. A little bit as a background, I'm also a fellow at the Jacques Delors Institute, and there we were currently writing a paper on the bioeconomy as a vehicle to actually invite the conversation between different parties in society in a polarized society. You know, how do we get the right to talk to the left and the greenish component? And going into it, we actually see, and I'm going to present this, that the bioeconomy is actually a political economy as well. It's heavily loaded, and even simple terms like regenerative agriculture actually have a political meaning, and I will go into this on the bioeconomy. First, and the Commission already presented on this, the bioeconomy, the food system is actually a giant, especially on the global level. When you look at, you know, in terms of economic sector, nature GDP is about 50% of global GDP. But also, like in France, purely the food system, if you take the food system as a definition, it's 36% of GDP. Agriculture, the bioeconomy is the largest employer, the largest impact on the earth in terms of greenhouse gases, biodiversity, water consumption, nitrogen pollution, and so forth. And it feeds the world, and we don't feed the world perfectly. I don't have to go into the details on this. Also, when you look at kind of current risks, there's every year there's the biggest, the survey on the biggest risks by the World Economic Forum. All of these things really point to the success or non-success of the bioeconomy. And this year, it just was published, polarization is currently considered among the top 10 things that actually might challenge the global economy and the success of the global economy. And that's exactly what I want to talk about. So when we go through the different definitions of the bioeconomy, we have bioeconomy 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. And when we go into the details and the definitions of it, we actually see, and this is more on the right-hand side, you actually have kind of concepts like green growth, which is more associated with bioeconomy 2.0. You have the mission-oriented economy, which is also currently a paradigm that's coming up on the European level. But then we also even have the digital innovation economy. And I will go now through this and exemplify a little bit how politically loaded the bioeconomy is and what kind of opportunity it actually creates in order to have a proper conversation, because everyone, when we talk about the bioeconomy, we all mean very different things. So the bioeconomy 1.0, that's the manifestation in Brazil. This is kind of, you know, very extensive livestock agriculture and quite exploitative and not great for the planet. Also doesn't create much of a job and value added. This is a mock-up of the same landscape where you have basically here a restoration area coming in. You have a large-scale bioenergy plant. It's actually not a bioenergy plant in this particular landscape. It's a pulp and paper mill. But you can also imagine a larger bioplastics refinery of this kind of biomass going in. And what's happening in the background, that goes back to the indirect land use change question, you have intensive regenerative farming going on, and probably the food system, especially the diet shifts, are not really happening. Is this a possible and feasible scenario? Yes, it is. When you look at globally on the land-sparing potential, so basically if the world were to produce globally in a most efficient manner, we only, and this is a calculation only for cropland, not pasture land. Pasture land, there's even more. We can actually reduce the land footprint of global agriculture by 50% almost. Just by purely, come up with, in this case, regenerative agriculture practices, which is kind of the greener version of agro industry. What's also interesting is it doesn't really matter where you do it. So in the middle bar, you have an optimization of land sparing globally. When you do this just on a national level, so if every country does land sparing or applies best agricultural practice, global land use or global cropland would actually be about 56%. So that's interesting. So we don't have to have a massive global optimization implying massive global trade. We can actually do it on national level and do national-led policies with almost the same outcome. What would that mean of kind of global land sparing and this national targeted land sparing in terms of environmental consequences? What you see is, although you apply more fertilizer locally on a field, since you need less hectares, the nitrogen and phosphorus footprint will either stabilize or even be reduced. Of course, you have very local pollution problems. Water footprint would go down, greenhouse gases would go down, and of course, the land footprint goes down. So here, yes, this would, the bioeconomy 2.0 in a green growth framework would actually deliver quite significant impacts, positive impacts. What about costs? Costs and then consequently prices. So if we were to intensify globally, remember, we need less hectares, although the cost per hectare probably goes up a little bit. The total cost of production would also reduce by almost 50%. So here this means if we were bioeconomy 2.0 only intensifying, global costs have the potential to be reduced by 50%. And the prices would go down quite significant. Same thing if we would do it just on a national level. Massive benefits. However, here's the grain of salt. If you intensify, this means mechanization. Globally, we have about 500 million farmers, and if you calculate the associated dependence on the household, we have about 2.5 billion. These are all dependent on this. However, if we do land-sparing agriculture, we only need 20 million. You know, this is not much. So here, the social consequences of the bioeconomy 2.0 would be massive, really massive. Just purely in India alone, we would have 3-digit millions moving to the cities if there's no other rural employment. So that's what would happen under bioeconomy 2.0 if we were to roll it out globally. Now let's move on to the bioeconomy 3.0. So here you would do actually ecosystem service payments. So here, this pocket of land, before it was an offset, a biodiversity offset, here it becomes a payment for rewilding for biodiversity gain. This would be a riparian flood resilience corridor, and this would be construction timber for the Bauhaus in Europe, and this would be a local poly-production refinery plantation where you actually go and exploit the biomass in many diverse ways, including producing artificially produced protein, for example. And then what's happening in the background is actually you would not do the regenerative agriculture, you would actually go for the paradigm of agroecology. Very different in terms of philosophy and the very practice on the ground. But you would also go into circular biosystems, more local, and definitely you would have to go for a diet shift overall. That's the bioeconomy 3.0. But what's also many times the narratives of the bioeconomy 3.0 is very, very open to mission-oriented innovations. Really radical game changers. I give you one example. So here, this is a mission-oriented breakthrough technology. We published this some 10 years ago, where you basically produce in the desert algae, and you feed it to chicken and other livestock. When you do that cost calculation, we're about 50% away from competitiveness. So this is not a crazy technology. And oil majors like BP invested in these technologies in order to produce biofuel. But if we were to use it for the food system, what would happen? Pasture land would all in a sudden, we would free 1 billion hectares of pasture land if these things would outcompete current livestock production. Arable land would, of course, also go down because half of the global cropland is delivering feed for animals, and the other half goes to human consumption. And, of course, what you would do then, if you have land sparing through such land-sparing technologies, you could do forest restoration and plantation up to 2 billion hectares. This is massive amounts of land. And if you were to combine this with biochar production, we heard about Denmark is pioneering with carbon capture and sequestration. What's the result of it? We could actually go to 1 degree if we were to do this on a global level. This is the most radical scenario in the literature, just with one technology that comes out of the bioeconomy. So here there's a lot of solution potential in this. And with bioeconomy 4.0, we just turbocharge everything with the novo kind of industry approach. And we can move it into all of these two narratives we talked about before, either bioeconomy 1.0 or 3.0. It just goes further. However, it's very hard to predict what will have to happen to landscapes because this really depends on the economies of scale properties of the solution technologies that will come out there. I got the flag already. All what I want to say is the bioeconomy is a political economy, and it's not only driven by technologies as such, it actually depends on our choices and the political discourse we engage in. And I think Denmark is actually on a very, very interesting way, and I hope you will show the way how to do it.
Thank you so much, Professor. And please take a seat. So thank you so much. And we will move straight on to our next expert panelist. I would like to welcome Marje van Veldhoven, a young farmer at Leende, Netherlands. Marje will talk about new business opportunities through the valorization of underused feedstocks for farmers and foresters. Welcome, Marje.
I would often say I'm just a simple farmer, but I'm also a master's student in public administration. I'm an opinion leader, but I'm also a young woman on a mission. Because I have a dream to produce healthy and sustainable food for our society, now and decades to come. So what would my perspective add to such a great session with leaders, policymakers, scientists and experts, beside a more practical approach? Lately, I've come to understand that my perspective is more diverse than that. Through my different roles, I get to experience the agricultural sector in many different ways. And therefore, I'm glad to add my perspective today. For now, I've gathered my experience as a dairy and insect farmer, and I globalize these so they apply to more farmers. Farming is great. It's personally rewarding. You get to work with nature. So why is it nowadays so difficult? Farming is a capital-intensive trade with expensive land and equipment. We are heavily dependent on companies that produce animal feed, for example, or plant seeds, and companies that take our products off our hands. Lately, costs have been on the rise, while our selling product doesn't go up at the same rate, which leaves us with a tiny profit margin. And with this tiny profit margin, it's hard to take over a farm. And therefore, we have to inherit, it's important that we have to inherit a part of the farm, otherwise it's almost impossible. And farmers, young farmers, are important because these young farmers are the foundation of our food security in Europe for the future. Picture that we wouldn't be here. What will become of the EU in these somewhat troubled and turbulent times? But you may ask, yeah, we started an insect farm. What made my parents and me do it? So, with a tiny profit margin, it's very risky to invest a large amount of money in a new business opportunity. So for us, it was essential that we could start small and expand with time as we get more experience, and that also gives a market time to adapt. But my dad used to say, when you walk at the back of the herd, you always walk in the shit. But not everyone is able to walk in front. There has to be enough demand for more farmers to join in. It has to be rewarding for both the consumer and the farmer to make a sustainable and healthy choice. But I'm not able to facilitate such choice. But a minister can, for example, by taxes. But what are the key points for young farmers to facilitate a steady transition? I would say, don't bet on one horse. Don't facilitate just one type of transition. Keep as many options open. And that means plant-based, or cultured meat, or insects, or just the usual animal products like dairy, eggs, and meat. It's all about balance. And that balance is important because, for example, our insect farm, we reproduce insects. Those insects need to be fed. So you need livestock that produces manure for arable farmers to produce grains. It's all about balance. I see the flag, so I will continue. Not everyone can make the transition at the same time. You have front runners who try new business concepts. You have the middle section that follows if there's enough demand. And you have the laggards that are happy doing it the old ways. Go slow in order to go fast. That's quite a paradox. But when you start small, with small investments, you can expand with time and drive meaningful change in the future. And reward sustainable and healthy choices. It has to be rewarding for both the consumer and the farmer to buy or to produce these sustainable products. But I intend to prevail. Like Martin Luther King, I have a dream to produce healthy and sustainable food for our society, and with me, many more young farmers in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Maria, and I invite you to join Michael on the stage. And we move straight on to our next expert panelist, who is Professor Nesli Sözer from VTT. That stands for Technical Research Center of Finland. Her presentation title is Technological Advancements with Reduced Environmental Impact, Cellular Agriculture Approaches in a Nutshell. Please, Professor Sözer.
Thank you, Minna. And okay, so I have to be seeing it from here. Thanks, and I'm also very, very happy to be here and listening different stakeholders, and I'm looking forward to the panel discussion. I think this will be really a very exciting opportunity for me. So coming to the facts, actually the current food system and our diet is animal dominated. And we need to diversify the food production by integrated use of plant-based resources, fish, meat, animal resources, algae, insects, microbial-based cultivated meat, and plant cell cultures. Moving from there, what is cellular agriculture? So cellular agriculture is nothing new. It has been in our lives. It's one way of using cells as factories. And most of us are eating cheese in our breakfast every day. And there is one critical element there, which is the rennet enzyme. And it is made by using fermentation, or nowadays we call it cellular agriculture as well, so using cells as factories. So it is nothing new. It is one way of farming where we use single-cell organisms and bioreactors instead of animals and fields for food production. So how it happens? So in order to make the cells produce the needed ingredients or components, we have to feed them nutrients, which comes from different kind of feedstocks, biomasses. And like in the case of traditional farming, you have to also give water to the microbes, and we need also green energy resources. Here, a critical component is industrial biotechnology tools, which will help us to reach the desired outcome. In one of the earlier questions, the consumers and allergenicity and improving the nutritional quality was mentioned. And this is one way. Imagine an egg protein. Egg proteins are quite allergic, is engineered to reduce the allergenicity. And cells can be utilized as the whole biomass in the form of microbial biomass, cultured meat plant cells, which can be utilized to generate meat or dairy alternatives. Or then we can extract ingredients, proteins, lipids, bioactive compounds that can be utilized as food ingredients directly or as new kind of additives. Why cellular agriculture? It is much more efficient in terms of land use. It generates less greenhouse gas emissions. As can I get the, so, okay, I cannot get the, well, you are seeing in the figure, it's a recent publication from Nature, published in Nature Food, the comparison with beef, poultry, and common plant-based ingredients such as pea, eggs, and milk. And then you would see that gas fermentation, which is one way of producing biomass, and then recombinant protein production, which is, for example, producing specific proteins, milk protein or egg protein, is in fact much more efficient compared to especially beef and poultry. Obviously, the other advantages is that you liberate the production from geopolitical issues, you get stable price, and then you have alternative solutions and improved resilience when it comes to diseases. And yet it creates new business opportunities for the farmers and many other stakeholders. Then I will move to a new concept which can enable a soft, maybe transition, that is the hybrid foods, where we can combine cellular agriculture ingredients with plant-based or animal-based ingredients. And this way we will be able to reach the scale-up, close the gap. When we are talking about plant-based alternatives, there are nutritional and sensory challenges. So by combining cell egg ingredients, we can close the nutritional gap, sensory gap. A good example for this from the commercial side is the Impossible Burger, where they have integrated soy protein with heme protein that has been produced by precision fermentation that gives the nice taste, and then also the cooking experience. So turning off red color to brown and then having the bleeding experience. And these are the examples that I would like to give. The Impossible Burger was a commercial success, but then the other ones that we have been developing in my organization, VTT, Technical Research Center of Finland. First one is a burger patty-like product. So it has been produced by using cellular agriculture ingredients, plant cells. They are those cells that are very, very important in the Finnish economy, berries. So they are berry plant cells that gives the nice red color that you see there, but also integrates good bioactive compounds, which is important for your health. Then single cell proteins and lipid-producing microbes. And here the lipids are those lipids that are very important for our health, such as omega fatty acids. The one in the middle is a beef jerky-like kind of a product that is made solely based on one single ingredient, a new single-cell protein strain that has protein, but also dietary fiber. Here I would like to also highlight that in Europe, especially, when we look at the nutrition, we don't have a protein intake problem. We are over-consuming proteins, but we continuously have a dietary fiber intake problem. And this way, we can also, at the same time, improve the intake of protein, lower it, and then increase the dietary fiber intake. The last example is a co-cultivation product by combining flocculating yeast cells with lipid-producing strains that gives this nice crispy texture, chicken nugget type of a product. So when we look at the predictions from United Nations food system subgroup, there are hidden costs in our food system. And that hidden costs are associated with the environmental impact of our food system, then also our poor diets, and obviously that cost is tremendous. It's $20 trillion per year. And there is one way of maybe improve that and use that hidden cost or lost money to maybe something else. And here I would like to also highlight protein diversification, moving from monocultures to more diversified production, and using animals, plant-based, and fermentation, cellular agriculture-based in a synergy. And that would be my last slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nesli. And then we will move on to our fourth and final expert panelist, who is Dr. Min Ha Wong, a director at a star in Singapore. Dr. Wang will talk us about market access and consumer preference insights from successful implementation. Please.
Good morning. Thanks very much for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here. I thought I would add on the dimension of the consumer because we have talked a lot about technologies and bioeconomy and the drivers for the change, but we have not yet fully explored the topic of the consumer. So I thought I would start off by reflecting a little bit that actually the consumer and trends have always evolved, right? So it's a very dynamic market we're dealing with. And if you look at how the food and the consumer has actually changed along the years, you might recognize that since the 1970s, actually the food industry has evolved, right? We have, in the early days, looked a lot at convenience foods. Over the time, we have started thinking about better for you foods, things around reduced sugar, reduced fats, and then looking at fortified foods, so high in vitamin C, high in iron. And then increasingly in the later part of the 2000s, started looking at organic foods, and then post-COVID, the question is, what's next, right? So a lot of these have been driven by enablers, which I listed here, either technology enablers, consumer-driven enablers, changes in the global market, and so on. But the question is, what is next? And if I were to guess, I think a lot of the trends that is relevant to the bioeconomy today will actually shape the consumer of the future. And I listed a few trends here. One is to think about closing the gap between health span and lifespan, meaning to maximize the period of health, period of life that you're healthy. Thinking about food security resilience, particularly in the post-COVID environment where supply chains have evolved significantly, tech-fueled wellness, and also more approaches to mindful eating, right? So these are clear trends that we see quite strongly that resonate very well with the Sustainable Development Goals as well. So within that context, the question for Singapore is that where do we play, right? And I thought I would give you a bit of context of Singapore, and I hope that context helps you understand the reason for certain decisions that we made. And it might not be fully relevant to you, but I hope that experience might be informative in different ways. So for Singapore, we have grown, we're actually only about 60 years old since independence. And if you look at the chart here, the local farm production changed dramatically as we industrialized. So the takeaway here is that we don't really have a lot of farmland today. We import nearly all of our food, but that also means that we are very open. We have no entrenched industries, particularly in the food sector. So we are very open and progressive in how we think about food. And we continue to want to play in the value chain of food. So how do we evolve our economy, our bioeconomy is through, I would say, a few different waves. The first wave is we try to attract what we call brand owners. So companies like Abbott, Mondelez, etc. started coming in. With that brand owners, we then evolved into attracting what we call ingredient B2B innovators. And then the wave 3 is where we started trying to grow a lot of startups and small companies. We have tried to drive this through a holistic ecosystem development through startups, agri-food incubators, convening platforms like the Singapore Agri-Food Week, and venture capital funds. So it's a pretty holistic picture over here. And if I were to summarize, I think the key ingredients for our implementation is the following. Firstly, we ensure that there's government support. I think the Danish minister just mentioned tax and also investments. So coincidentally, I put both in the same bullet point, right? Clear tax regulations as well as streamlined grant processes as well. So we made sure that we have clear tax, but also very clear grant award process. We provide very clear food regulatory and progressive support. Technology, we try to drive it through very significant investments, more than 300 million Singapore dollars, which I convert into euros would be 200 million euros or so in food tech, as well as to ensure a steady supply of VC funding, so as to take things and translate that from lab to scale. So I would say for us, we try to continue to support innovations in agri-food tech, a lot of it driven both by need as well as by the belief that food tech does help support the bioeconomy, both in terms of sustainability considerations, strengthening our food resilience, as well as probably also even enhancing the quality of your food, because using different biotechnology approaches, you can actually think about improving the functional properties of food as well. So here I put some snapshots of what we have been doing in the recent years. We have worked with researchers, industry partners to develop novel foods, improve the regulations of it. We have also launched things like the Food Tech Innovation Center together with our sovereign wealth fund, Temasek, which is also stepping in to invest and co-invest via public-private partnerships. So with that, I hope I gave you a flavor of what Singapore has done, and I'm happy to, together with the panel, address any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Min. And indeed, we will now move on to the panel discussion. And I warmly welcome all the questions from the audience as well. So please approach the aisle microphone or lift up your hand and there will be another mic going around. I will join you here. It seems that our audience is still digesting a little bit about what was served to them. And I would like to start with asking Nestle. Our food systems are facing major challenges and unsustainable. What do you see are the key benefits of cellular agriculture to help solving this sustainability challenge?
Now, I'm naturally a loud person and microphone really amplifies it. So what are the sustainability impacts of cellular? In my presentation, I have touched a little bit, but to continue from there, obviously, the major benefit is that land use, it requires much less land, and then it gives also opportunity to carry the production in a more controlled environment. So that means that there is an opportunity to reduce the pollution, manure or fertilizer runoff, or then leaking of antibiotics to water resources. Then talking about water, we are also, I mean, I'm coming from Finland where we have plenty of water, but elsewhere there is a water scarcity problem. So the production is more water efficient. Compared to different segments of traditional agriculture. And then I would also highlight the new opportunities for the farmers there, but also other stakeholders talking about the farmers, obviously. Fermentation requires, oftentimes, if you're not doing carbon capturing, sugar. So where would the sugar come? Obviously, for that, we need biomass. Plant biomass or forest biomass. And there you go. That's an important opportunity to utilize agri-waste, so integrate circular economy, zero-waste approaches to the production by repurposing whatever is not able to generate value into new kind of products, biomass production, or insect production, which can go for food or feed, and can really generate new opportunities.
Exactly, so collaboration.
Collaboration.
Is very much. I would then like to jump over to Michael. So, as for environment and food security benefit from the transition, but how about the value chain? Who benefits the most? Is it value creation for companies? And how about the low-income countries? How do they benefit from this sustainability transition?
As I wanted to illustrate it in my slides, it really depends on the political economy implementation. So if we really go for, let's say, bioeconomy 2.0, this is basically the agro-industrial paradigm, and you have economies of scale along the entire value chain, from the input industry, fertilizer industry, all the way to the bungies and so forth. So here you would see a lot of concentration in the value chain, and we know where the profit sharing goes. If you go also depending on the properties of the technologies, you know, if you have a biorefinery with many different outputs and you also care about how your landscapes look like, then you will have a more distributed system and the power will be more distributed and you would see different sharing arrangements. So it really depends on both the properties of technology in the long run and how the bioeconomy, the political economy of the bioeconomy is actually governed.
Thank you. And I see there are questions from the audience. Maybe the mic first. Oh, actually, the gentleman here was first, and then the mic. And we take those two one after the other.
So just a small question. I understand that we are at the very starting point of all this discussion, many question marks and many questions in which direction we go. When we say it can positively impact agriculture, it's still a question mark. It depends on how we'll do that. In some of the scenarios you said, we could lose massively farmers. How our rural territories will look like, how we want our rural territory to look like, how far we are inclusive in this rural society, or whether those industries will be in rural areas or could be in urban places, how it will impact more developed regions and how it can impact less developed regions. So for me, there are opportunities who are there with many political questions. I was surprised by your presentation when you said that you just stopped producing food on farm. I don't know how your society have reacted to that. And on one of your slides, it said that is less investment in cellular food recently in the last years, if I have seen it well. There is a global trend to reduce the investment.
Thank you, Ursula. Was that a question directed to me? Maybe you want to take that straight away?
Sure. Yeah, thanks very much for the question. I think several very relevant points. The first one, just to provide a bit of context of why we pivoted away from traditional farming, is because Singapore is just a dot on the world map. Like, we're very, very tiny, and we have 5 million people. So we couldn't possibly allocate too much land just to traditional farming. So what we have done is actually we retain some land for aquaculture as well as urban farming. So try to intensify some of the farming activities. But that said, we still import more than 90% of our food. So what we do is then we try to partner with regional countries like Malaysia and Indonesia and try to secure and work with them to make sure our supplies are secure. To your earlier point around working with farmers and also how bioeconomy can change the industry, I think we really see them as partners because, as Nestle also mentioned, the feedstock for many of the bioeconomy activities, fermentation involved, comes from agricultural sources. So without farms and farmers, actually the bioeconomy doesn't work, and food doesn't work. So we definitely see it as a very complementary, synergistic part of the Singapore food story as well. Yeah.
Without agriculture, the bioeconomy doesn't work. That's a good line. And then back to audience. And if the question is addressed to a specific panelist, please state that in your question as well. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Friedl again from Euractiv. I have a question for Nestle and one to Nestle. And sorry, I forgot your name. Michael? No. Sorry. So you're coming from research, but I think there are like a lot of challenges for implementation at the European level. Germany is very, very cautious, the German society, for gene editing or any technique that is touching the genes of living beings. I had discussions with my mother, so consumers in Germany are very afraid of these techniques, and we have huge discussions. And also, I remember Italy and other countries are very much against this development, so I think they also forbid some processes. And then the question maybe for the two of you, I saw on one slide regarding sustainability, and you spoke about that the investments are going down. That reminded me a bit of the huge energy consumption which was, I think, on your slide, the last point. And as the war in Ukraine, we saw that the bubble about vertical farming kind of popped because the energy prices were so high and there was less tech capital flowing into this innovations. So my question would be, how big is the energy consumption and how much does it rely on the general feeling in the stock market for like tech capital?
So many questions in a single shot, but let me start with the question related to gene editing. So actually the examples that I showed you, they did not contain any gene editing there. And when it comes to cellular agriculture, there are different ways of doing that. One is the biomass production. There is already one, so to say, cellular agriculture, biomass production, ingredient-containing food that has been existing for decades and decades from UK, corn. I don't know how many of you are familiar, but it's a biomass, fungal biomass that we have been eating. And of course, there are now new ones coming. So there, the production in the biomass is actually, you are focusing on increasing the yield. There are different ways of doing that. You don't need to do gene editing. However, sometimes that's also utilized as an approach to engineer the protein, to also boost the production yield, such as if you are producing egg protein or meat protein, sometimes you might need to do that. But then you extract, so those extracellular products that I was mentioning in my slides, there is no gene-edited organism left in the ingredient. So in that sense, probably it hasn't been that well communicated with the general consumer, and that's something that we should improve. Then coming to your question related to energy, those calculations that I have showed, it's from a scientific publication. Obviously, these new ways of production, they are still in their infancy. So the data that has been obtained to calculate the life cycle assessment, sustainability markers, it's based on assumptions over assumptions. And we know that especially in the cultivated meat part, the data is really like very, how do I say, is based on true assumptions. The energy source that you're using, so green energy there is quite important. And then especially when we are talking about biomass production or precision fermentation, what happens before the bioreactor tank, so pretreatments applied to the feedstock, and what happens in the end. So the downstream processing is quite important when it comes to energy and water use. So pretty much in the bioreactor, of course, you can optimize the conditions and so on, but these two, beginning and end, is quite important. So you must choose pretreatments and downstream processing that are less energy and water consuming.
Thank you, Nestle. And Min, would you like to complement that shortly? And then we'll have a quick question from the audience.
We distinguish between being progressive and efficient with our regulations and food safety, right? So I think for us, we are very convinced that although we are fast and efficient with our regulations, we're very convinced that at least when it comes to the food that we approve, it's still safe. That said, I think we also recognize that food is a very emotional topic. So not all food is for everybody, which is not what we're trying to do as well, right? So some people eat tofu, some don't. It's a very natural part of the food industry that some people are attracted to certain foods. So for us, I think what we hope to do is to educate the market enough that a good segment of the population knows it's safe and accepts it. And so it's, to your broader question of the funding, a lot of it is also this market discovery phase, right? So with this relatively new alternative proteins or other sources from bioproduced foods, like how do we then think about discovering the market in terms of building the consumer brands, reaching the channels and so on. That then would tie into how do you raise capital, because a lot of it is then how big is your addressable market. Right?
Yes. Thank you very much. You have answered part of my question, but I would like to complete a little bit with what is your vision, listening to the food engineering. Michael was starting a little bit with the bioeconomy 0.2. Because I'm wondering, food engineering and non-communicable diseases following up on highly processed foods, how does this match? So envision in 2030, we only have engineered food on our plates. We lose our cultural identities of the different regions. When we travel, we get everywhere the same food. We don't taste the different nations anymore. What is happening to our health, looking into that we may overconsume because we have normalized our taste and we don't feel the saturation anymore? Thank you.
And was that addressed to a specific panelist, or?
I would say it goes to Nestle and Min, and especially with the food engineering part, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's keep the responses short.
Okay. With engineering and processing, I will take the angle of food processing, and then you can move to genetic engineering and gene editing. So when it comes to these alternative approaches, let's start with the low-hanging fruit. That's the plant-based, okay? And when taking plant-based ingredients, either there are two ways of having them, in the form of a protein isolate or a protein concentrate. Protein concentrates or whole grain flours, they are much more minimally processed. So they are minimally processed compared to the wet extraction. But we as humans, we are not designed to consume those. There are anti-nutritional factors that needs processing, and really heavy processing to get rid of those, to break the anti-nutritional factors, to improve the protein digestibility, and also to get rid of the allergens and so on. So you have to do processing when you are taking an alternative production technology into account. And the starting point is, as I said, the plant-based ingredients. So I think in the end, when we are talking about food, we should be more talking about formulation, not so much about the, the processing of the ingredients. Formulation meaning it has to be nutritious, high in proteins, high in dietary fiber, low in salt, sugar, and saturated fats. That should be the focus when we are talking about health and nutrition.
Very good. Healthy, well-formulated product.
For me, I think two points. The first one is we are not trying to replace the whole food palette, right? So a lot of what the biotech promises is to complement it. So keep what you're eating, but in addition, you could actually increase the nutritional value of what you're eating through, say, a more broader selection of options. So that's one. The second is I think that there's also the realization that, when you think about like foods and what biotechnology promises, what we obsess about is actually the regionalization of it. So we actually spend a lot of time on the sensory piece as well, meaning like, let's say in the European market, you might be looking at plant-based nuggets, but for Asia or Singapore market, we actually look at dim sum and so on. So I don't think we'll have ever a situation where you go to different geographies around the world, and then you choose to, you end up with eating the same thing, because you and me know like we like different things, right? It's a very personal, regionalized choice that we make, and we have that choice.
Thank you. As primary producers are equal partners in the bioeconomy policy making, and especially young generation is very much needed in this policy making, so that it will cater for the future generations to come. What's your advice to us? How can we facilitate this inclusive policy making to include the younger generation as well?
Usually the usual incorporation is already done. So lobby parties that represent our best interest, and also voting for a party that represents your choice. But I think one thing that is forgotten is there's also an informal option, and that means just asking a farmer if it applies to what region or the research, or just asking a farmer. And I think that helps. But if it's allowed, I would also want to ask a question to Michael, because we all talk about tech in here, and I usually feel that farmers are always getting the short end of the stick. We are usually family farms, and our power is limited in the whole value chain. So in your slides, you mentioned that in the future, maybe we have 20 million farmers that feed the world. So how will the transition take place from now having a lot of farms and having family farms to getting massive farms? And what will that do to on a social level to a country, but also a farm itself?
First of all, it's a political choice. And in Europe, we invest a lot into the maintenance of smaller-sized family farms and maintain it, although it's hard because the basic economics are against it, because we have economies of scale also on the farming side. But it's a choice. We can choose it. If you look at the country, I mentioned India, for example, if the country will not intervene and by some economic necessity, farm size really increases a lot, then historically, our societies, we had huge amounts of labor demand during industrialization. So there were actually proactive programs to get farm labor into the industry sector. In many of these economies, this doesn't exist anymore. And in Europe, we went abroad. We colonized North America and other places. So we exported about 60 million people during this period. If this is happening now in India and many other geographies, this cries out for social unrest on a very large scale if we don't really address it. And this is an issue that is actually predictable. This is and it's a choice, and it's not managed at the moment. At some point, we will realize, especially if we see technology progressing much faster and see these consequences, because all in a sudden, if one of these technologies really can outcompete traditional agriculture, farms will actually go out of business on a very large scale, because they simply will not be able to compete. And this is also foreseeable. Production of proteins with modern technology will very soon, in decades, outcompete animal farming. I'm quite sure, on very large scales. Not completely, of course, because markets are still segmented, and we will still want to eat once in a while as a luxury good, a steak or so. But the foodscape, the kind of diets we will consume, will be very different. I'm very convinced.
Thank you. And I think that concludes our panel. We know there's a lot of work ahead. There's good policies that need to be taken. And what's important is that we include everybody to this process. And with that, I would like to thank our panelists. Let's give them a big applause. The final closing words of this session will be given now by Peter Weckheim. Please, Peter.
Thank you, Minna. Colleagues, I don't want to keep you much longer, but I hope you agree this was an excellent, inspirational session. We heard that we have still a long way to go, a lot of challenges, but there are also solutions offered by the bioeconomy. Please stay connected and tuned on also the European side of the bioeconomy. We want to come forward this year, as I mentioned in my introduction, with an updated bioeconomy strategy. I expect that in February, March, we will open a public consultation also to that respect. And you are all invited to also take part, share your views of how we can move forward to a sustainable circular bioeconomy. You are invited to look at our internet sites, but also our LinkedIn accounts. Please connect us with you. And we also will hopefully see under Danish presidency, forthcoming Irish presidency next year, also continuation of these discussions. I see an Irish colleague here in the audience. They have already indicated they will host the Global Bioeconomy Summit in 2026. So the discussions and the work on this, all of this can continue. Let me say thanks again to all the speakers, the Danish minister, and all the panelists. Marie, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks also to the team which organized this session, DG Agri Orsolja, together with our great moderator from my team, Minna Hutunen. Please give her an applause. And many thanks to all of you for your interest in this session. The bioeconomy depends on you. You have to implement it. You have to move it forward. So thanks very much for your interest, and have an excellent and inspirational day. Thank you, and bye-bye.